To start off our list at number 10, we have the Bunny Man Bridge. In 1904, not far from this bridge, in Fairfax Station, Virginia, was a mental asylum. Nearby residents didn't like the fact that the mental patients were near their new homes, so they had it shut down. While the patients of the asylums were being transported, their bus crashed, and all were found except for one, by the name of Douglas Griffin, who disappeared to the nearby woods. After this disappearance, dead bunnies would be littered all over the forest floors and trees with attempts to consume them. And then finally, on Halloween night, Douglas Griffin struck and killed a group of teenagers that were hanging out near the bridge. He then proceeded to gut and hang all of them as if they were bunnies he had hunted. A police report soon came in about a man in all white with a bunny mask throwing a hatchet at a car, which would eventually give way to this urban legend. Stealing our number 9 spot, we have the Fairy State Plantation House. With 11 spirits calling the Fairy State Plantation House their home, Haunted House seems a fair title for this site. Now used as a museum and educational center, the house also offers Halloween tours called the Stroll of Lost Souls, and is a regular site for ghost hunters and paranormal activity groups. The story goes that this house was used originally as a school, tavern, and eventually a mansion. Once the mansion had burned down in 1828, it was reconstructed by abused and mistreated slaves. The house's many spirits included the woman in white, who fell from the stairs, and the slave named Sally Walk, who is said to be still grieving for her late fiance. But the most famous is Grace Sherwood, who is named the Witch of Pungo. She was in fact the last person convicted of witchcraft in Virginia, having to spend 7 years in jail and later being released. When she had passed away, reports say that her body disappeared without a trace, leaving many people to believe that she was truly a witch. Here at our number 8 spot, we have the ghost of Sarah Henry. Patrick Henry, an American patriot who coined the famous term, "Give me liberty or give me death," lived at Scotchtown with his wife Sarah and their 6 children. Everything was normal and fine until Sarah gave birth to their 6 children. Following that, she would show signs of mental illness, and at this time, mental illness was not a defined term and would often be associated with the devil instead. Henry decided to keep his wife hidden in the basement of his home, hidden from the public to protect his family's image, with people often saying that she was possessed by a demon. As time passed, Sarah would become more violent, eventually having to be in a straitjacket. And after her death in 1775, she was buried in an unmarked grave. It's said to this day, a woman in a long white gown appears in and around the house, just standing there, showing that maybe Sarah was not ready to leave her home, even when her family did. Coming in at number 7, we have the Poorhouse Road Tunnel. This tunnel was built in the early 1900s as part of the railway in Virginia that ran between Staunton and Lexington. It didn't take long for the tunnel to acquire a tragic reputation though. The story goes about 2 young girls playing in a nearby woods when all of a sudden a stranger had approached them, appearing friendly at first, but quickly turned sinister and decided to execute both girls. Now it's said that the voices of these girls cry from the darkness of the tunnel, and once you begin to walk through, you may begin to hear the whispers from the girls. Some other haunted reports include the appearance of handprints on cars, fog appearing in photographs when it is not visible, and the sound of disembodied voices. Guess you can say it's a poor choice to travel to Poorhouse Road. Straight out of a Twilight movie, at number 6 we have the Richmond Vampire. However, this is not your ordinary vampire. The story goes that in 1925, the Churchill train tunnel collapsed with workers still inside. Now, the tragedy of that is very real, but surprisingly in the wreckage, a bloody man appeared with jagged teeth and skin hanging off his bones. Everyone had thought it was just a mere survivor of the incident, but here is where it gets weirder. As they got closer to the man quickly jumped and ran away to the nearby Hollywood Cemetery and disappeared into a mausoleum within. They say the vampire still inhabits the cemetery grounds, which has led many satanic and cult groups to visit and attempt to summon the vampire once again. At the middle of our list, we have St. Albans Sanatorium. Before St. Albans was a sanatorium, it was the site of the Draper's Meadow Massacre. Shawnee Indians beheaded, tomahawked, and even bashed in the skulls of the settlers in the 1700s, and took the survivors back with them to their village. Then, during the Civil War, the area was bombarded by artillery during the Battle of Cloyd's Mountain. People claim to see the smoke and hear the sounds of the artillery fire from the Civil War. Once it became a sanatorium, patients suffered inhumane experimental treatments that left some disabled for life due to its controversial treatment and care. The combination of the bloody history of the land along with the misery within the sanatorium created a perfect storm of paranormal activity, which is why St. Albans Sanatorium is considered to be one of the most haunted places in Virginia. Coming in at number 4, we have the Martha Washington Inn. The mansion was built in 1832 and functioned as an all-female college. But when the Civil War was happening, the college was used by the young women to nurse the injured. During this time, there's a story of one of the nurses who played her violin to one of the wounded soldiers. She sat by his bedside all the time, and eventually, they would fall in love. Unfortunately, the soldier succumbed to his injuries and passed away. The nurse was completely devastated upon hearing the news, and in a few weeks, the woman would follow him in death. It was reported that the music of the violin continues to play in the room of the wounded soldier. This site is now a hotel and a spa, but I don't know how relaxed I could be with its dark history of ghosts. With the number 3 spot, we have the lovely Lover's Leap. Before Europeans settled in Virginia, there was a Shawnee brave and a Cherokee girl who met in the forest. There was rising tensions between their two tribes. This was like a version of Romeo and Juliet. These two would meet in secret because of the restrictions placed from each of the tribes. But one day, the man visited the spot where they would always meet, which was situated near Duffield, Virginia, on the scenic cliffs. But this time was different. The woman was on the edge, ready to jump, saying that she wouldn't be able to see each other ever again. With that being said, the man decided that the only way they could be together was to kiss and jump off the cliff together. Now, people who visit the area say that they've seen the shadowy figures of a couple on the edge of the cliff, while some say they feel the strong urge to jump off when they come with their significant other. Taking our number 2 spot, we have the Crawford Road. Crawford Road is one of the most haunted roads in Virginia. One of the stories tells of a group of friends that were cruising late at night until they decided to turn up the fun by going down Crawford Road. While driving down the road, they joked, laughed, and sang songs from their brand new CD. Everything had been fine until they had reached the bridge. The track they were listening to on the CD let out a high-pitched, obnoxious screeching sound. The noise lasted for about 10 seconds until they were far enough from the bridge. Then the noise stopped and the CD played as normal. Another incident involved a wedding that took place in the area. The bride was not a happy one and regretted all of her actions, which led her to hang herself by the bridge. As people drove down this road, they would report seeing this woman in a white wedding gown standing on top of the bridge only to jump off and disappear. Now, taking our top spot in our top 10 scary Virginia urban legends, we have the Battle of Cold Harbor. Said to be one of the most haunted battlefields in the United States, it was here that over 150,000 men fought a long, gruesome war, which claimed the lives of over 15,000 men. As the war finished, it was reported that the lack of medical assistance led to dugouts being crammed with both the living and the dead, and those who passed away couldn't even get proper burials. The conditions of the battlefield made this place a living hell for those who had to fight in it, and now it's reported that those who visit experience paranormal occurrences, such as smelling the distinct scent of burned gunpowder or a fog that would appear and disappear in the area, which could be resembling the thick gun smoke from the past battle. Other reports hear the cries and the screams of the dying soldiers waiting for someone to bury them properly. Restless souls are scattered throughout the park, which is why it makes sense that people get an overwhelming sense of sorrow and fear when they walk on that field. At our number 10 spot, we have the Seven Sisters Road. Located in southeast Nebraska, just outside Nebraska City, is a road that locals call Seven Sisters Road. And if you're trying to find this on a map, it will be named L Street. But I wouldn't recommend taking a road trip down this place. Legend goes that a man had an argument with his parents and his 7 sisters. It got to a point when his whole family hated him and he looked to seek revenge. So one day he waited in the woods outside of his home and waited for his parents to leave. After he forced or baited his sisters one by one outside of the house, he would end up hanging each and every single one of them where this road is situated today. Then eventually a road would be built on this path of the trees, causing them to be shut down. Ever since the construction of the road, this road is said to be haunted by the 7 sisters who were executed. Many who have driven through the area report having problems with their cars stalling, headlights mysteriously dimming, speedometers freezing, and windows that roll up and down seemingly on their own. At our number 9 spot, we have Alliance Theater. On the east side of Nebraska is one of the most iconic buildings in the state, and that is the Alliance Theater. This was built back in 1903, starting off as a hotel, but in 1938, it was then rebranded into Imperial Theater until it switched to the name Alliance. It would host many different performing arts, but it said a few performers passed away inside of the theater. Some were caused by accidents, such as an actress named Mary who passed away after a piece of lighting equipment fell on her. Now, over the years over its existence, many workers at the theater have reported their own ghostly tales. Some include whispers as if someone's right behind them, and shadow figures walking around, and some are even seen performing. Even in 2002, the owner Gerald Bullard had said to reporters that, quote, "If the theater is actually haunted, then the ghosts are very friendly." It still remains open to this day, and many visitors claim to see the spirit of Mary. At our number 8 spot, we have Blackbird Hill. North of Decatur, Nebraska is a hill overlooking the Missouri River, and this hill is said to be infested with spirits. One notorious spirit that most visitors spot is of a young lady who could be screaming near the cliff. Legend goes that in 1840, a young couple in the area fell in love. This relationship carried both of them through school, but soon after they were done, the boy decided to travel abroad. His initial plan was to travel the world, then come back and marry the girl. But after a few months, the man never ended up returning back home. Months turned into years, and eventually the devastated girl gave up and married another man. The new couple then decided to move to a small cabin to what is now Blackbird Hill. And this is when the girl spotted her ex-fiance walking up to the cabin. She was shocked and then confessed a love for the man and went back home to tell her new fiance that she wanted to leave him and have a divorce. The new fiance got very angry and in a rage took her to the nearby cliff and proceeded to jump off together. The ex-fiance arrived, but just too late, only to hear the agonizing scream of his former wife. This occurred on October 17th, and many visitors gather up in this day because it's said that you can still hear her screams down the cliff. At our number 7 spot, we have the Poison Girl at Centennial Hall. Built in 1897 in Valentine, Nebraska, is the historic Centennial Hall. It functions now as a 12-room museum, but before it was originally built to be a high school for the kids in the area. Then in 1947, a young female student was murdered inside of the school. She passed away after playing on her clarinet. This caused everyone to suspect that someone had intentionally poisoned her clarinet reed. Ever since the incident, the school is haunted by this little girl. The teachers will report her in their classrooms after school times, and this would accompany the feeling of dread. Other visitors and students report to hear her clarinet being played in a very ominous way. Now as a museum, visitors still report this little girl roaming the halls. She is said to have tugged on people's clothing, as well as placing her clarinet on many of the artifacts inside of the museum in hopes that someone will play it and be poisoned like she was. At number 6 spot, we have radioactive hornets. Although this theory is debunked, it was a crazy one when it was first released to the media because many people didn't know how radiation worked, and whatever they said about it would just scare you. Story goes that after the nuclear disasters following World War II in the 1940s, Japan's Fukushima nuclear plant created a giant mutant killer hornet due to their exposure to radiation. The hornets were said to have grown 4 times their size and were reproducing exponentially. Then one year in Nebraska, it was reported that many people were passing away with stings and swelling on their bodies, which led many people to place a blame on radioactive hornet. Again, this is just a myth and no radiation didn't cause overgrown killer hornets, but still these large Japanese hornets do exist and they go by the name of Asian giant hornet. At a number 5 spot, we have the Bailey House Museum. This red brick house in Brownsville was built just after the Civil War by Unison officer Captain Benson M. Bailey. He, alongside his wife, lived in this house for many years until financial depression hit, causing them to move away. This relocation would eventually place them in a more dangerous area, leading to their eventual murders. Their murders were never solved, but many claim that it was the fault of a jealous neighbor who poisoned the two in order to get their property. Whatever happened, what is known is that the spirit of Captain Benson Bailey is said to lurk the home to this day. He is said to slam doors open and shut in the house in order to display his dominance, and when he's agitated, he will swing them back and forth until you just stop doing whatever it is that he doesn't like. Others have reported seeing the man himself walking the halls and even standing up against the doors motionlessly. At a number 4 spot, we have Hummel Park. Despite being a beautiful park in appearance, there is a much darker story to it that makes you think twice before stepping foot here. This area is said to be the place where many lynchings, hangings, and satanic rituals were performed, and some believe they are happening to this day deep within the woods of the park. A stairway in the park has been called the Stairs to Hell because it is reported that it's impossible to count the same number of steps ascending the stairs as it is descending the stairs. Other than the fact that this place is covered in satanic graffiti, this place is just one of those places you shouldn't test out. You know? Just in case. At a number 3 spot, we have Walgren Lake Monster. Just west of Nebraska is the Walgren Lake, and this body of water is said to hold a 40 to 100 feet beast. Witnesses have said it looks like an alligator that has 2 front legs and a flipper on its back. Others have said it has a serpentine body, which closely resembles the Loch Ness Monster. But I swear, everyone everywhere believes they have the Loch Ness Monster in the area, or is that just me? It's said that you'll know this monster is near is that when you smell a hard stench of rotting flesh. The first written record of this monster is from a 1922 issue of the Hay Springs News. The following year, a local man named J.A. Johnson described the monster in an interview with the Omaha World Herald. According to the report, Johnson and his 2 friends were camping on the banks of the lake when they noticed a creature about 60 feet away. The men claimed that as soon as the beast saw them, it belted out a huge roar, whipped around, and plunged beneath the muddy lake water. At number 2 spot, we have the Ball Cemetery. Ball Cemetery is a cemetery in Springfield, Nebraska that was first used during the 19th century by pioneers. There is only one way in and one way out, and trespassers have been greeted by a caretaker with a shotgun who lives nearby. But instead of the caretaker keeping people out of his cemetery, it's more like he's trying to stop them from entering a place that is cursed. For decades, it has been said that this dark and lonely plot of land in the middle of nowhere is haunted by mysterious entities that defy rational explanation. Tall male apparitions sometimes attack nighttime visitors, and a female ghost laughs, speaks, and tugs on people's clothing. Photographs taken here often contain anomalies which believers swear are evidence of ghostly presences. All the way at a number 1 spot, we have the Hatchet House. In the town of Portal, there is a 1-room schoolhouse that held a very gruesome murder. Legend says that back in the early 1900s, a teacher snapped at her students after they were misbehaving for hours. She had already been having problems back at home as well, so this was her final straw. Except this would be a little bit too brutal for our liking. She would then proceed to lock the door to the classroom and pull out a rusty hatchet from underneath her desk. From here, she would decapitate every single student in the class, and then she took their heads and placed them on top of each of their desks. And it gets worse, so I apologize. She then carved out their hearts and brought them over to a nearby bridge to throw them down below one by one. At number 10 spot, we have the Phantom Hitchhiker of Black Horse Lake. Near the city of Great Falls in Cascade County is a tale about a very notorious yet mysterious hitchhiker. If you happen to be coming off of Highway 87 going down Fort Benton, you may encounter a man on the side of the road at night. The area is very flat, so the man is very easy to spot when you're driving down this road. But unlike other people on the side of the roads, this person isn't looking to get a ride. Instead, once your car gets closer, the person is reported to roll over the hood of your car, across the windshield of the vehicle, as if they had been struck. As people begin to check on the man after they hit, they realize that they had hit nothing and the person they previously saw just disappeared. Over the years, there have been hundreds of reports that claim the same thing. They drive on this road, then they hit a man, only to find out it was nothing. Many believe this is the spirit of a Native American man who got struck and killed on this road. However, there's still no written document on it. At number 9 spot, we have Sacrifice Cliff. Overlooking Billings, Montana is Sacrifice Cliff. Despite the breathtaking views and scenic paths, this place has a very dark history attached to it. I mean, you probably already know that just by the name alone. Story goes that this cliff was once a peaceful meditation spot for the men of the Crow tribe. When they arrived here, they would be in complete silence, which showed the amount of respect they had for the area. However, a smallpox outbreak hit the area, causing the majority of the Crow tribe to perish within days. So one day, some of the boys returned to their homes from Sacrifice Cliff, only to discover that their entire village, including their family members, had all passed away from smallpox. They were so distraught they didn't see a point in living, so the boys decided to sacrifice themselves over this cliff. They would return back to the cliff with their horses. Then they would proceed to blindfold the horse and then ride off these very cliffs to their deaths. Although this is a very sad tale, if you decide to visit this place at night, you may hear the sound of these horses as if they're falling from the cliff to this day. At number 8 spot, we have Flathead Lake Monster. Lurking in Flathead Lake is said to be a monster that closely resembles the Loch Ness Monster. But hey, I swear every place has their own version of it, so here's Montana's version. For those who don't know, Flathead Lake is situated northeast Montana, just in case you guys want to avoid this place for your next swim. Many visit this lake for its unprecedented beauty, but since 1889, there's been reports coming in the boatloads about this creature. It's described as a very large eel-like creature that moves around like a snake and is as long as 40 feet. Many say its head is shaped like a bowling ball with multiple humps on its back. No wonder people think this is the Loch Ness Monster. It all started in 1889 when James C. Kerr was making rounds across the lake when he and his passengers discovered this creature. They described it as a whale-like from its sheer size alone. Ever since, there's been hundreds of sightings, but who really knows what lies underneath the depths of this lake? At number 7 spot, we have the Alberta Bear Theater. Located in Billings, Montana as well, is the famous Alberta Bear Theater. The theater was originally named the Fox Theater, but in 1987, the theater was renamed the Alberta Bear Theater in honor of his daughter, Alberta. And this 1,400-seat theater was like any other. It was beautiful on the inside, which housed many professional touring companies and various performing artists. However, most visitors and workers claim to see the same two spirits lurking inside of the theater. This includes one male entity and one female. The male is described as wanting to be noticed, out of sorts, and very possessive, while the female is described as being very benign and very friendly. So let's talk about the guy. It's said that he is the spirit of a past employee who took his own life at the theater, which keeps him there trapped for eternity. So if you guys are looking to come to this theater, be on the lookout for these two. At number 6 spot, we have the Garnet Ghost Town in Coloma. Coloma, Montana is known as the Mystery Camp and is a ghost town located a few miles north of the better known Garnet Ghost Town on the Garnet-Back County Byway. Very little is known about the Coloma settlement other than records indicating that it began in 1893 and experienced high gold mining activity starting in 1896. But by the 1940s, the mines had completely run out and the boom went bust. Eventually, the place would be emptied out and be left abandoned, and this is where many locals claim that the spirits ended up taking over the place. One state historian claims that once the sun sets in Garnet, the spirits of the town historic's residents come alive. Ellen Baumler, the Montana Historical Society's resident ghost whisperer and author, wrote, quote, "At midnight, people have heard ghostly fingers striking piano keys with the music floating across the empty buildings." She continued saying, quote, "Especially during the winter months, visitors see visions and hear unearthly noises. They cause no trouble, and anyone who visits the deserted town in the dead of winter should be prepared to meet them. They hide in the shadows, laugh in the wind, and come out when you least expect them." Right in the hump of our list, we have Bear Canyon. Mashed in between Chestnut Mountain and Mount Ellis is a beautiful stretch of land known as Bear Canyon. It's best known for its scenic hiking trail and is one of the most popular sites in the Bozeman area. And as we all know, a place that is beautiful on the outside is usually hiding something very dark on the inside. According to the Bozeman Paranormal Society, Bear Canyon is a place for spirits and not for humans. Sightings of the paranormal have been recorded since the late 1800s, which is ever since we started to settle inside of that piece of land. Many people have reported seeing a little girl who attempts to lead them off of the trail and into the woods. The little girl targets women, and for those who follow this girl, they will find themselves lost in the middle of the canyon. Others claim to have seen a strange mist on Bear Canyon Road, and many have gone missing when they enter inside of this strange mist. Number 4, Moss Mansion. Built in 1903, this red brick mansion was a turn-of-the-century home. It was 3 stories tall with 28 different rooms inside. The mansion was built for the Moss family, who treated it like their pride and their joy. Eventually, they would have around 6 children and 3 servants occupying the home. Years went by and all was good, until they suffered their first devastating loss. Just 5 years after the house was built, the youngest child named Virginia passed away while she was only 6 years old. Then 40 years later, in 1947, the dad, Preston B. Moss, passed away from a heart attack. Then soon after followed the wife, who passed away from a cerebral hemorrhage. Then 30 years later, another one of the sons named Melville passed away in 1984. This family ended up inhabiting the home from 1903 all the way until 1984. So best believe their deaths in the home have some sort of effect. The mansion has now been turned into a museum, and many visitors report various paranormal activity. Some include a ghostly female voice singing in the billiards room, and many staff members report a cool wind that goes up and around their bodies as they walk through the halls of the mansion. At number 3, we have Bannock Ghost Town. When gold was discovered along Grasshopper Creek in Bannock, Montana, the town went from a ghost town to a blooming community. Following the economic growth, a man named Henry Plummer became the sheriff of the town and the leader of a gang known as the Innocents. Plummer's gang is linked to over 100 murders and robberies, and during his brief time as sheriff, Plummer erected the Bannock Gallows, only to be hanged from them himself after being apprehended by a group of vigilantes. Bannock State Park still has the gallows, but many people who have visited claim that there's too much negative energy and supernatural activity in that specific area. Many claim to even see the spirit of Henry Plummer himself, as he's said to be still pleading for his life. At number 2 spot, we have Little Bighorn Battlefield. The Battle of Little Bighorn occurred on 1876 in the grassy plains of Bighorn River Valley and bluffs that exist around and along the Bighorn River. This was where General Custer and his men were brutally and completely defeated by the Sioux and Cheyenne warriors led by Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. So best believe a place like this has a few restless spirits. I mean, every battlefield has one. You guys should know this. Visitors and employees have reported strange noises and even seeing full-fledged apparitions of soldiers after dark. Now, near the battlefield cemetery is where the most activity is said to happen. Many visitors claim to have been consumed by the feeling of deep sorrow and loss when they walk the cemetery grounds. And the stone house, which was built in 1894 for the cemetery's caretakers, is home to some of the most terrifying ghost stories. Some include lights aggressively flickering on and off until you leave the home, and others report seeing soldiers with missing limbs such as missing heads or legs, indicating some of the injuries they went through during the war. At number 1 spot, we have Dude Rancher Lodge. Built in 1940 by Annabelle and Percival Goen, the Dude Rancher Lodge was originally constructed using salvaged bricks from the old St. Vincent's Hospital. The couple ran the hotel together until 1962, where Percival passed away after a car accident. Annabelle continued to run the hotel on her own, though slowly her health began to decline. She lived in an apartment at the hotel and was cared for by her dedicated staff until eventually she was moved to a nursing home. Then on February 2nd, 1983, Annabelle passed away. Since her passing, this lodge has had too many supernatural activities to count. This includes televisions turning on and off while the housekeepers are cleaning the room, knocking on the doors when no one is on the other side, the sound of children running in the halls with no children being present, and a mysterious female voice was even caught on audio tape in the basement of the hotel. If you ever wanted to stay here, then try to avoid rooms 223, 224, and especially 226, which is said to be Annabelle's grandson's room, who took his own life in that room. At number 10 spot, Pfister Hotel. In the heart of Milwaukee, Wisconsin is the infamous and luxurious Pfister Hotel. When it opened up in 1893, it was unlike any other hotel at the time. It had features such as electricity, fireproofing, and thermostat controls, which was almost unheard of at the time. It's been open for over 130 years now, and during its time, countless of people have come forward to tell about the terrifying experiences they had inside of this hotel. For example, 2015 NL MVP winner Bryce Harper stayed at the hotel back in 2012. He would go on to tell ESPN that one night he woke up to find that the table in his room had moved to the opposite side and his clothes were folded near it on the ground. The next night he said that he couldn't sleep because all he could hear was the restless spirits. He eventually decided to switch rooms, and after further research, there was an article published on May 1983 claiming that the hotel was built on a private burying ground.
That explains a lot.
At number 9 spot, we have Boy Scout Lane. This isolated rural street in Linwood, Portage County is said to be one of America's most haunted roads. It's only less than a mile long, but it's notorious for the things that happen on this road. The road gets its name, Boy Scout Lane, because this is the location where a troop of Boy Scouts were murdered on their camping trip during the late 1950s. The case never ended up getting solved, but many people had their own theories. Some believe that the murderer was their scoutmaster, while others believed it was the bus driver who drove them to the woods. Regardless of whatever story is true, what is said is that these Boy Scouts haunt the forest around this stretch of road. Some who drive on this road see 4 distinct lights in the distance, which are supposed to resemble the 4 Boy Scouts looking to get through the forest. But if you decide to be brave enough and camp out there, you will most likely hear the sounds of footsteps and breaking branches coming in all sorts of directions in the middle of the night. And if you sleep in your car, you may wake up with childlike handprints on the vehicle. So if you can, try to avoid this street at all costs. At number 8 spot, we have the Rhinelander Hodag. This creature, native to the town of Rhinelander, Wisconsin, is said to have the strength of an ox, the ferocity of a bear, and the cunning of a fox. In basic words, this creature is the ultimate predator. Eugene Gene Shepard, a pioneer and lumber cruiser from Rhinelander, claimed to have captured this terrifying beast on camera in 1896, right before it pounced on him from a white pine log. The most dreadful sight was captured by a camera. A hairy creature 7 feet long and 30 inches tall with threatening tusks, powerful jaws, and sharp claws. However, in this case, it turned out to be a big hoax when a group of scientists came to visit Shepard after he allegedly caught one. Regardless, this creature has carved its name in the town of Rhineland, and if you decide to take a visit to the town, you'll find its logos on the town, school, you name it. At number 7 spot, we have the Bloody Headstone at Riverside Cemetery. Opening in 1870, the Riverside Cemetery is one of the oldest cemeteries in the town of Appleton, Wisconsin. While the graveyard stacked up over the years, there's one gravesite that is significantly different from the others. This is the case of the grave of Kate Blood. In past reports, they would call Kate either a witch, a murderer, or even a victim of murder. However, it was much more different than that. Born in 1851 as Catherine Blood, she lived a short life, only having reached the age of 23 before passing away from tuberculosis in 1874. Now, around Halloween every single year, when it's a full moon, people claim to see blood ooze out of her tombstone. Her tombstone is by the back of the cemetery, which made more people believe further that they tried to hide her for a reason. At number 6 spot, we have the Vampire of Graceland Cemetery. The town of Mineral Point in southwest Wisconsin was terrorized by a vampire for a short period of time. More specifically, these sightings were first reported back in 1981. It was a snowy night in 1981 when police officer John Pepper got calls saying that there was a mysterious figure that looked like a vampire walking around the cemetery. When the officer arrived, he immediately spotted the figure, but supposedly it began to run at incredible speeds to a point when it lost the officer within seconds. After the report was completed, not another vampire would be sighted until 23 years later in 2004. This is when several witnesses claimed that a strange slender man was attacking people by jumping at them from atop trees. The police arrived again only to see the figure run away at supernatural speeds. Then in 2005, a couple was fishing when they spotted a tall, pale, slender man with alleged fangs approaching them. Luckily, they noticed it immediately and pulled out a flashlight to see more clearly, and they claimed that the light started to physically hurt the man, which led more people to believe that it was a vampire. In the hump of our list, we have the Lake Winnebago water monster. In east central Wisconsin lies the shallow freshwater lake Winnebago. Back when the Winnebago tribe inhabited the shores of the lake, they would tell stories of a fish so big it would snatch up entire deer and moose from the edge of the water. And when I mean snatch, I mean it would eat the entire thing whole, including the antlers. It was so feared by the natives that they refused to cross the river no matter what happened. Over the next few years, reports were made, but nothing was as significant when a group of men spotted a dark figure floating near the coastlines. After further inspection, they were sure that they had spotted the monster, claiming it was around 15 to 20 feet long. Some locals claim that the monster is a prehistoric sea serpent that managed to survive through many grand level extinctions. Not much else is known about this creature, and many people to this day refuse to go near this body of water for this reason alone. But considering this lake has a max depth of 20 feet, I don't understand how something so large could fit in there. But that could just be me.
That's impossible!
At number 4, we have Summerwind. Located on the shores of West Bay Lake in Vilas County is the now abandoned mansion Summerwind, formerly known as the Lamont Mansion. Not much remains from this building as it's pretty much destroyed to a pulp, but when the building was still up, it had all sorts of controversy. During their 15-year stay at the home, the Lamont family would report many strange occurrences, but it wasn't until the mid-1930s until they decided to finally move out altogether. This was all because one evening, the basement door decided to spring open with the apparition of a man standing behind that door. As soon as they saw this, Mr. Lamont grabbed his firearm and shot at the figure twice before it just vanished out of thin air. Then in the 1970s, Arnold and Ginger Hinshaw bought the home in hopes to renovate it. Except they would be met with a whole load of issues as well. This included electrical problems, disappearing tools, and windows opening and closing by themselves while people were looking out of them. When the renovators decided to quit the project, the two decided to do it on their own, but when they removed the dresser, they noticed a crawl space that contained a real human skull and loads of black hair. At number 3 spot, we have Bloody Bride Bridge. The Bloody Bride Bridge has a wonderful name, doesn't it? Located in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, is said to be the most haunted bridge in the entire state. And I mean, just by reading the name, it's a no-brainer. However, more specifically, this is named Highway 66 Bridge, which doesn't really make a difference. Legend goes that one evening, a bride and a groom were driving over the bridge on their wedding night. When they were crossing, something happened, causing the couple to get into a fatal car accident on that very bridge. The bride ended up passing away, but nobody ever found out what happened to the groom. Ever since that evening, the bride has been reported to still be walking back and forth on the bridge. She's seen wearing the exact clothing she wore when she passed away, and that was a bloody wedding gown. Now people who have gone over this bridge have reported similar strange things. This includes many people believe they had hit a girl on the bridge, but when they walked out to inspect, there was just nothing there. But when they arrive back in their car, they only find her sitting in the back seat. Number 2, we have the Phantom Man of Highway 12. Mostly known for their Devil's Lake State Park, the town of Baraboo, northwest of Madison, has another person that is terrorizing their people. In this town is a stretch of road known as Highway 12. This is a place many say not to go near because it's the most haunted road in Wisconsin. The majority of drivers claim to see a man walking on the side of the road wearing only a green jacket and worn out jeans. However, when they pass him and continue to drive, they notice they spot the same man miles out as if he had beaten the car in speed. Then when they pass him again, it's as if he keeps transporting ahead of them. They say he keeps appearing in front of you because he's just waiting for you to pick him up. But I wouldn't recommend stopping because no one has ever lived the tale to say what happens when you decide to pick up this phantom hitchhiker. All the way at a number 1 spot, we have the Wood County Insane Asylum. If you decide to travel up the middle of Wisconsin, chances are you will enter the small town of Marshfield. This was a place that had the Wood County Asylum, which is considered by many to be a hellhole of a place. When the asylum was completed in 1911, the entire building could hold 250 patients and 19 staff. However, this would be far from a rehabilitation place because many of the patients in this asylum would only get worse the more time they spent there. Many patients didn't get the help they needed, so many of them took their own lives inside of this property. And this type of insanity even drove some of the staff to take their own lives. Now, the supernatural didn't start after the place closed down. It was happening since the opening. Apparitions of former patients and staff were seen both on the grounds and in the main building while the hospital was running. According to one tale, one guy even claimed to have seen the devil's face in the boiler room but left without coming back. Now the area is an attraction spot for ghost hunters because there's a very good chance you will encounter something if you decide to take a visit. At number 10 spot, we have the Palmer House Hotel. In Sauk Center, Minnesota lies the Palmer House Hotel. This hotel stands on the grounds of the city's first hotel named the Sauk Center Hotel, which ended up burning down in June 1900. When the Palmer House was built the next year in 1901 by Christina and Ralph Palmer, it served as a shelter for distant travelers and a meeting place for many of the locals of the town. However, every single year there would be more and more reports of strange occurrences happening inside of the hotel. Guests and staff alike would initially notice cold spots associated with the feeling of dread, as well as doors closing on their own, but eventually various people would report disembodied voices and tugs from the ghost of a little boy seen running in the hallways. This place was investigated by American paranormal television series The Dead Files, and during the investigation, psychic medium Amy Allen confronted a dark presence attempting to take control of her physical being. The room with the most activity is said to be room 22, where this one lady says that she made contact with a ghost child named Thomas, but you can book any other rooms if you don't want to encounter a ghost. Your choice. At a number 9 spot, we have the Kensington Runestone. This slab of stone looking like straight out of the Bible was allegedly found somewhere in central Minnesota during 1898. It was found by Olaf Oman, who was a Swedish archaeologist who found it after removing a tree in his farm. The stone had Viking runes, and one of the texts read the year 1362, which ultimately suggested that Scandinavians arrived in North America 130 years before Christopher Columbus did in 1492. The text talks about a journey to discover the Vinland, which is considered to be North America, and considering it was found in Minnesota, it seems like they completed their task. So is this finally solid evidence to suggest that someone discovered America before Columbus? Well, not really. Many people believe this is a great big hoax, especially considering the fact that the family who discovered it had a book about runic scripts. And when more research was done, the language used inside of the stone was pretty modern. However, if this was true, this would be very groundbreaking news. At number 8 spot, we have Dead Man's Trail. The small town of Thief River Falls in northern Minnesota is known for two major rivers, the Red Lake and the Thief. These two rivers meet up within the town, and during the early years, it affected a lot of the development within the town. Many native tribes would battle for the land, with eventually the Ojibwa coming out on top and forcing the Dakota tribe out of the area. After years of conflict, this town eventually started to have more reports of the supernatural, with the most being reported during a hike in the Dead Man Trail. One story goes that the trail was being used as a hiding spot for a man wanted for murder, while another story talks about a Native Native American woman who was trying to escape from people chasing her. She ran as fast as she could, but her newborn baby would just slow her down, causing her to hide the baby beside the river. When she went back to get the infant, she discovered it had been carried away from the river. Hikers have reported witnessing her ghostly apparition, hunting for her infant to this day. At number 7 spot, we have the Mounds Theater. Built in 1922, this theater was once used as a venue for live entertainment and silent movies. While it had many good moments, there are many accidents inside of the theater. However, there are no reported deaths inside. Eventually, it would get closed down in 1967, then reopened once again in 2001. This little mix of accidents with abandonment is the perfect recipe for ghosts to live in, and this is the case made by many staff and visitors of the theater. Late night workers and janitors have reported being physically grabbed by a ghost, and others report a ghost named Red who throws things at women, and also a young girl has been reported wearing a pink dress bouncing a ball on stage when no one else is around. At number 6 spot, we have the Lake Pepin Serpent. Here comes another iteration of the Loch Ness Monster that lurks to depths below the US. Introducing the Pepe Monster, or PP Monster, whatever floats your boat, but I guarantee this beast won't. As it's mentioned from the name, this beast is located in Lake Pepin, which is basically the border between the states of Wisconsin and Minnesota. This monster became more popular in the media after businessman Larry Nielsen offered a $50,000 reward for finding this creature. After years, no one has had solid evidence of the creature. But Larry himself is convinced it exists out there and only wants to pay the money to see the creature one last time again. This is because 11 years ago, before he put the bounty out, he spotted a quote 200 feet long and 2 feet high creature going upstream. In the hump of our list, we have the Wendigo. This devil of a creature is a well-known one to many, but many don't know that the first original sightings of the Wendigo happened in the state of Minnesota. Wendigos are said to be as tall as 15 feet and very slender-like. However, don't be deceived. Because they are said to be very strong monsters that have a never-ending desire to eat and kill humans. The legend states that a person can become a Wendigo if they decide to take part in cannibalism or any other heinous acts of humanity. These bad deeds essentially turn you into this monster, and this creature can possess you and even turn you into one itself if the person is greedy or weak enough. There are multiple myths talking about what Wendigos look like, but majority of them describe them to look like an animal but very tall, with a skull as a head, long legs, and their whole body covered in hair and drenched in blood. They are also said to be very fast and have super hearing with an amazing sense of smell, and in some cases they are said to walk on water, but they're not Jesus, remember. So be very cautious next time you try to camp in the forests of Minnesota. At number 4 spot, we have Crazy Annie's Bridge. 95 miles out of Rochester, Minnesota is a bridge known as Crazy Annie's Bridge, and it's also said to be one of the most haunted bridges in all of America. According to hauntedhoville.com, this bridge is located in Henderson, Minnesota on 270th Street, just in case you guys want to take a quick visit. But I guarantee that's probably not the best idea. This bridge in particular is said to be haunted by a mother named Annie, who was reportedly from the early 1900s. Story goes that Annie lived in the area during the time of World War I. She fell in love with a man and started a family with 3 kids. But eventually the man would end up going overseas to fight in the war. And unfortunately, after months, the man would never end up returning. This is when the woman would go insane and eventually take her 3 children and drown them in this nearby bridge. And ever since, it's said that you can hear the cries of all 3 children and even the mother on the bridge if you decide to go on it in the middle of the night. Number 3, Hibbing High School. Hibbing High in Minnesota is not your typical average school building. Here, the staircases are marble, the railings are brass, and the art walls hold the whole almost medieval design together. The auditorium was modeled after the Capitol Theater, which is a sight in and itself. And when Bob Dylan was still Robert Zimmerman and a student at Hibbing High, he performed on the auditorium stage during a talent show. But even with star performers and a stunning design, it's a lone seat inside of the auditorium that attracts the most attention from everyone. The story goes that the first stage manager named Bill was employed at the school from 1927 to the late 1960s when he passed away after a chandelier fell on his head. Rumors soon arose that Bill really never left his favorite seat in the theater named J47. In the early 90s, Chuck Perry, who at the point had been stage manager since 1979, took a series of photographs of the auditorium after a woman reported feeling a cold chill as soon as she walked around J47 row. And lo and behold, one of the photographs taken with the Polaroid camera showed a man sitting in J47 wearing formal clothes and a top hat. and you could reportedly see right through him. So is this ghost? Who knows? At number 2 spot, we have the Hairy Man of Vergas Trail. In west central Minnesota, in a small town named Vergas, is the tale of the Hairy Man legend. And no, we're not talking about some random dad who happened to have a little too much hair on their back. This legend has existed in the region for the past 6 decades, and that's only because the reports are not done happening, and every single year it seems like there's a new experience with the Hairy Man of Vergas Trail. The man is described as being 8 feet tall, having long hair, smelling like complete garbage, and always walking barefoot. In other words, you would probably think this guy was a more civilized Bigfoot than anything else. Many believed he was just an old homeless man living in the woods and didn't want anyone near his land. However, the Hairy Man gained more notoriety after a man named Ken Zitzaw returned back from driving in the woods with dents in his car hood. He claimed it was the Hairy Man. Others have reported other attacks regarding the Hairy Man, but in the end, it's not confirmed if he really exists or not, or if he's just a figment of our imagination. At number 1 spot, we have the Glen Sheen Mansion. Minnesota's most notorious killing occurred at the Glen Sheen Mansion in Duluth. Elizabeth Condon, the heiress who inherited the home, was murdered in her bed in 1977. The body of her nurse was discovered on the Great Staircase, and the home, which is now held by the University of Minnesota Duluth, is said to be the most haunted in the state. After hours, employees have heard screaming, and some claim to see a white lady dressed in really dark clothing wandering throughout the entire mansion. At a number 10 spot, we have the Octagon House. This building is considered to be the most haunted home in all of DC, and after reading about this, I think it could be one of the most haunted places in North America. It was built by Colonel John Taylor back in the year 1801. The builder had its close connections to the presidents, and after the White House burned in 1812, President James and Dolly Madison lived there for a temporary time. Now, it's claimed that the entire house is haunted by the daughters of Colonel John Taylor. His first daughter passed away before the War of 1812, and the other ones passed away shortly after the year 1817. They are known to follow visitors around until they decide to leave the house altogether. As well, the house has been said to hold slaves back in the day, and many say the spirits of these slaves still remain inside of the house. There used to be a ring inside of the building to call the slaves, but after the War of 1812, the bell would seem to be ringing non-stop. In another instance, a gambler was even shot on the 3rd floor of this building, and many visitors claim they still see his lifeless body on the bed during some nights. At a number 9 spot, we have the St. Elizabeth Psychiatric Hospital. Opening in 1855, St. Elizabeth was the first federally operated psychiatric hospital in the United States, and at the time, it would house as many as 8,000 patients. Over the years, many people came to this hospital for treatment of their mental illnesses, as well as to house many of the wounded during the Civil War. However, by the 1950s, the hospital was under heavy criticism for the way they treated their patients, which caused many to pass away there as well. Then over the years, they would begin to lose more and more patients until temporarily closing down in 2002. Now that the east side of the campus has a new facility with new patients, many workers have claimed that it's one of the most haunted places in DC. Overnight staff workers claim to hear constant groaning sounds in the places of the hospital that aren't being used. And also as well, many people claim to see the spirit of Dr. Walter Freeman, who can be seen in the morgue performing lobotomies, considering he was one of the pioneers of the psychosurgery. At number 8 spot, we have the Congressional Cemetery. The Congressional Cemetery, or the Washington Parish Burial Ground, was established all the way in 1807, and nowadays it has as many as 65,000 graves occupying the grounds. This number alone should tell you that you may feel the presence of more than a few entities in this area. One notorious ghost spotted in the area is Civil War photographer Matthew Brady. Story goes that the Congress promised him money to take war photos, but when he brought them the photos, they never ended up paying him, not even $1. So in the end, he died with nothing to his name. Nowadays, he terrorizes the graves of the government officials who denied him compensation, and if you try to take a photo of his ghost, you'll find that your device is now broken. Over the years, this place has gone through many different grave robbers, which led to many disturbed spirits scattered around the entire cemetery. So, for a warning, visit this place at your own risk. At number 7 spot, with the Omni Shoreman Hotel. This grand hotel was built in 1930, and ever since its opening, there has been hundreds of reports from visitors claiming to see something supernatural within. It all started when one of the hotel's financial partners, named Henry Doherty, moved his entire family from what is now known as Suite 870. On their first night, their maid Juliet Brown called the hotel desk in a panic to tell them that she wasn't feeling good, but then before anyone could get to her room, she just passed away. Soon after, Mr. Doherty's wife and daughter would pass away. This would make Henry distraught, leaving the hotel with that suite being unoccupied for the next 50 years. Then, when Henry's apartment was converted into a hotel suite and reopened, staff and guests would claim to hear the sounds of faint voices coming from the dark corners of the room. And many reported that around 4 a.m., all the electronics inside of the room, including the lights and the TV, would aggressively flicker for a short time period. Now the room has been called the Ghost Suite, and I dare any of you guys to try a night at this place if you're in the area. At number 6 spot, we have escaping Alcatraz. Frank Morris was surprisingly an intelligent criminal with an IQ of over 130. He was born in Washington, D.C., and his parents abandoned him when he was only 11 years old, so he spent the rest of his childhood in foster homes. He was convicted of his first criminal offense at 13, and by his late teens had been arrested for crimes ranging from narcotic possession to armed robbery. He spent most of his early years in jail serving lunch to prisoners. The odd thing is that Morris was reportedly ranked in the top 2% of the general population in intelligence. He was measured by the IQ testing and he got a score of 133. He served time in Florida and Georgia, then escaped from the Louisiana State Penitentiary while serving 10 years for bank robbery. He was recaptured a year later while committing another burglary and sent to Alcatraz on January 20th, 1960 as inmate number AZ1441. He was part of the infamous 5-person crew who managed to escape Alcatraz. The crew used a raft made of raincoats and fake heads they sculpted during their time there to just trick all the guards. In the hump of our list, we have the Old Brick Capitol. This building once stood where the USS Supreme Court building stands, so it has a very rich history associated with it. The Old Brick Capitol was built in 1815 and was used as a temporary Capitol building for the United States. Throughout its time, it also served as a private school, a prison, and a boarding house during the Civil War. During its time as a prison, it was one of the most abusive ones. It had poor living conditions, and most of the prisoners were far more depressed than in any other prison in the world. This lack of care and attention caused many prisoners to pass away in the process, so it's no surprise that many came back as vengeful spirits. Visitors to the land report hearing banging on metal bars and distant cries of former convicts pleading for their lives. Many of the people can hear a person crying throughout their entire visit. Despite being kind of annoying, I don't think you would be brave enough to tell a person to stop doing this, especially if it's a full-fledged ghost. At number 4 spot, we have the British soldier fire starter. It was during the War of 1812 that the Great Burning of Washington occurred. In this attack, many important buildings in the capital were burned down, including the White House, then called the Presidential Mansion. Then things got unexpectedly worse for the British. As the US government fled the White House, the British thought victory was near. But then a grand-scale thunderstorm alongside a tornado swept the entire area around the White House, killing both British soldiers and American civilians in the process. If you can imagine a Michael Bay movie, that's exactly how I picture this scene going down. Now, it's said that a lonesome British soldier whose garments date all the way back to the 1800s appears on the White House lawn every now and again. It's said that the soldier is still roaming around the lawn of the White House with a rather large torch, almost as if the flame was eternal. At number 3 spot, we have Mary Todd Lincoln. Wife of Abraham Lincoln, Mary Todd Lincoln was said to have practiced spiritualism in the White House frequently. Influenced by the death of her second son, spiritualism was practiced by Mary to communicate with him and others she held dear in the afterlife. She would report speaking to her late son daily and would conduct seances within the walls of the White House. As word broke out, desperate families would come to her seeking the unknown. And in the midst of the Civil War, many widowed wives came to her in order to speak to their husbands. Mary would begin to notice strange things in the White House, such as hearing stomping and swearing in the room of former President Andrew Jackson, known as the Rose Room. At number 2 spot, we have the Demon Cat. Spotted time and time again around the White House, the Demon Cat takes on many different variations, to different people appearing as a normal-sized cat to some and as large as an elephant to others. The Secret Service has reported seeing paw prints around the White House, which is surprising since no pets are allowed in this White House. The weird thing is that the cat only appears during a presidential switch or a national tragedy. Basically, we can call it the bearer of bad news, and potentially this is where we get the idea of an unlucky black cat. At a number 1 spot, we have an Illuminati-influenced street design. When people begin to look at Washington, D.C. from a bird's eye view, many have realized that the street designs incorporates the use of occult symbols, including an inverted pentagram with the bottom pointing directly at the White House. An anti-Masonic Christian named Ed Decker said, quote, "The satanic pentagram under which the White House sits is an open door through which Satan has access to our president." So the person who designed the streets was a visionary planner named Pierre-Charles L'Enfant. And to many, he was considered to be a Freemason or at least part of the Illuminati. However, after deeper research, I found that he was inspired by the city of Karlsruhe, Germany, so he didn't take inspiration from any other group. Anyways, many parts of the street resemble Christian crosses as well, so easily another conspiracy theory could be made. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong and he is related to some sort of satanic group. At our number 10 spot, we have the Devil's Tramping Ground. Located in the dense forest of the Harper Crossroad area in Bear Creek, North Carolina, lies a camping ground known as the Devil's Tramping Ground. And I know, the name alone should tell you all about the place, because in local lore, they suggest this is the location where the devil, quote, tramps. And this has caused a small circle of area to become lifeless and never have the ability to grow anything. Locals have tried to revive the area by planting various seeds and also using fertilizers, but nothing seems to be able to fully grow within this circle of land. Some historians believe this was also an ancient meeting place for local Native American tribes. They would come here to do ceremonial dances and other festivals. But in the 1930s, newspapers were hit with the news that a beast was guarding these grounds. The story read, quote, "Coon and possum hunters and their dogs have been on more than one occasion chased from the vicinity of the Devil's Tramping Ground by a ferocious beast said to resemble a black bear." At a number 9 spot, we have Dana Auditorium. Located in Greensboro, North Carolina is Guilford College. This place was built all the way back in 1837, so it went through countless waves of students. Most of the places in the college are completely normal, but in the 1960s, the Dana Auditorium was constructed, and it housed the Guilford College Music Department. However, they failed to realize the history of the grounds they built on. Across the street from the campus are graves of men dating back to the 18th century who passed away during the Revolutionary War, and many believe that the location where the Dana Auditorium stands is the same location of the hospital used to take care of these soldiers, and where many ended up passing away. Many students and staff members recall feelings of cold spots and the feeling of being grabbed by something they just can't see. Others report a soldier wearing clothing from the 18th century, and they say it's a soldier who passed away at the former hospital, but he's not harmful. Instead, he just acts as a protector of the area. At number 8 spot, we have the Ship of Fire. Off the coast of Ocracoke Island, it's said that on the night of the new moon each September, you are able to spot a ghostly ship that appears out of nowhere, engulfed in flames, and it slowly goes closer and closer to land before completely vanishing out of thin air. The legend goes that this was the ship of the Palatines. These were a group of German Protestants who originally left England back in the day. As they were on the boat, they pretended to be poor and hide their golds and coins and other extremities from the corrupt captain and his crew. And this is the part when they messed up, because when they began to see the shores of North America, they just started to celebrate, showing all their valuables in a rush to get off of the land. The captain and his crew began to see the amount of wealth their passengers had and decided to postpone the docking and wait till the next day. So during the night, the captain and his crew proceeded to murder every Palatine on board, which included all sorts of ages. Then they left on small boats and they torched the entire ship behind. At number 7 spot, we have the vampire beast of Bladenboro. During the 1950s, something was going out and leaving behind a lot of dead dogs around the woods of Bladen County. Eventually, news outlets would begin to report a creature that is so strong that it's just going out and attacking everything in sight. This animal was reported to be draining the blood of neighborhood animals, 8 dogs, a family of kittens, and at least 1 lamb. Early eyewitnesses report that the beast was around 100 pounds, and many thought it was just another wolf or mountain lion. However, it wasn't until the beast attacked its first and only human. The next day, the police chief said the town of 790 people was as quiet as he's ever known it. Eventually, everyone was strapped up and were ready to kill whatever beast that was out there on a killing spree. However, the beast seemed to have vanished from the town. At number 6 spot, we have Lake Norman. You guys are gonna get sick of this, but I guess there's literally a version of the Loch Ness Monster in every single state of the US. North Carolina's version is Normie.
We can't kill a normie.
Lake Norman is the largest man-made body of fresh water in the state, and ever since, it's been under heavy speculation of what lies underneath the depths. For example, prior to the year 2000, there weren't many reports of alligators, but nowadays it seems like they're native to the lake. So that brings up the question, what else became native to Lake Norman? Many people believe the answer to that question is a beast closely resembling the Loch Ness Monster. It's a long serpentine creature with scaly fins, and it's been reported to chase fast boats and even bump into water skiers and swimmers. On one occasion, a professional scuba diver encountered this creature and said it bit off one of his flippers clean off. However, others believe it could just be a mutant fish because this is a man-made lake. Who knows, it could be from all the pollution. In the hump of our list, we have the Balsam Mountain Inn. Located in Balsam, North Carolina is a wooden hotel now known as the Grand Old Lady Hotel. But for the context of everything supernatural, we're just gonna call it by its original name, the Balsam Mountain Inn. This hotel was built all the way back in 1908 by 2 brothers-in-laws Joseph Kenney, and Walter Christie, in hopes to expand their business. While other hotels in the area were failing to start, the Balsam Mountain Inn was in a very good area, so they had plenty of business. By the late 1980s, the entire hotel was emptied out, however, as all things must come to an end. Then in December of 2017, a business person by the name of Marzina bought the hotel, but her first warnings were from the former owners and staff claiming that it was haunted. Marzina decided to report her own findings, and after sleeping in one of the rooms, she claimed to have been woken up in the middle of the night and have her blanket taken off of her. At number 4 spot, we have Brown Mountain Lights. In Pisgah National Forest is the Brown Mountain, and many visitors and locals have reported a series of ghost lights or orbs that pop out of nowhere. According to Cherokee history, a significant battle between the Cherokee and the Catawba Indians took place at Brown Mountain around the year 1200 AD. The unexplained lights are thought to be the result of Indian maidens still looking for their husbands who perished in the battle. These lights can be seen in many different colors, including white, red, yellow, orange, and even blue. On top of that, the lights have been inspected by the US government 3 times, numerous times by private companies, and frequently by the Appalachian University students. And no one has been able to give a proper explanation to this. And to this day, these lights will always be a mystery. So the best way to find out about them is just to go and check them out for yourself. At number 3 spot, we have the Highland Hospital. Located in Asheville, North Carolina is the infamous Highland Hospital. It was built in 1904 by Dr. Robert S. Carroll, and it became a mental institution to take care of those who had nervous diseases. As the years went by, the hospital would decay from the inside out. In 1948, a fire engulfed a section of the hospital, causing the deaths of American novelist and painter Zelda Fitzgerald, along with 8 other patients. For those who don't know, Zelda Fitzgerald was the wife of F. Scott Fitzgerald, who is the one who wrote The Great Gatsby. And she was in the hospital because she had to undergo an electroshock therapy, but got trapped due to this fire. Nowadays, the place is a recovery home for teens and young adults, but many of the residents and workers claim to see the spirit of Zelda. She can be seen walking through the halls, and others even report talking to Zelda, but much of that conversation is a whole lot of confusion, and she ends up vanishing by the end of it. At number 2 spot, with the Biltmore Estate. Originally built to be a vacation home for George Washington Vanderbilt, the Biltmore Estate was a grand mansion that happened to be the largest home in the country at the time. Several past guests and even employees have related tales of hearing a voice continually speaking the name George in the hallways. It is believed that Edith Vanderbilt herself, who is thought to be another spirit that is said to also reside in the mansion, is walking the halls and maybe looking for her husband. Some of the groundskeepers who worked that night had overheard party-like conversations, glass clinking, and laughter. However, the only issue is that nobody is hosting any sort of party during these times. The family never had a pet, but visitors claim to see a headless orange cat walking out in the garden and usually shows up before bad luck strikes a person. The area around the estate is pretty haunted as well because back in the day, many hangings were done and these spirits are still trapped in the area. At number 1 spot, we have the Helen's Bridge. In Asheville, North Carolina is one of the coolest looking, but also one of the scariest bridges in America. You guys can be the judge of that by the end of this point. It's been said that Helen's Bridge has been haunted for nearly 100 years since its construction in 1909. The bridge was created in order to have a roadway connecting a mansion to the rest of Asheville, but it just made sense at the time, right? So how did the bridge get its name? Story goes that a single woman named Helen lived in Asheville with her infant daughter. One day while cooking, a large fire engulfed the entire home, causing her to rush out of it, leaving her daughter behind. The entire house would end up burning down, and after she received news of her daughter's passing, she just completely broke down mentally. Then one day, Helen decided to take a walk to the nearby woods, and before coming across this bridge to the mansion, she hung herself on one of the steel posts. People who have driven to the bridge have recalled dealing with car trouble despite no prior symptoms. Issues like drained batteries, engine stalling, and other mechanical issues were said to have been reported. At number 10 spot, we have the Skin Tom. This is a well-known one across the entire state, so I apologize in advance if I don't do this story justice. But somewhere in Wallen, Tennessee, a young man named Tom was living a very privileged life by many of our standards. He was a very good-looking person, he was funny, and very intellectual.